Hello, everyone. I'm Jean-Claude at Beyond Mystic, and welcome to today's Beyond the Vault edition. With me, of course, is Mr. Anty Schectman. You can find him at milesfranklin.com. Andy, welcome back to the show. How are you?
JC, my man, good to see you. Sorry I've been out of commission for a little bit, but it's great to be back again. Thanks for having me.
Always good to have you on. And Andy, I have to say, I was looking at the newsreels from the last maybe 24 hours to prepare the slide deck for this show. And there's a lot of mainstream people suddenly saying the stuff that you've been saying here for the last number of years on my show. And I'm like, holy shit, we're either in the twilight zone or we're this close to all of this coming out in a big way. So Thank you for joining me, Andy. Today we're going to go through some of the news items here on the deck. Thank you everyone for joining us on live stream here on YouTube, on Twitter, and also on Rumble. Let's behave. I'm also on YouTube today, Andy, just in case we have some issues with stuff. So some of the keywords we'll try to avoid here.
Yes, sir.
Today. Okay. Let me look at this first clip. I played this last night on the show too. And at first, Andy, I wanted to have your take on it. When I saw the interview or the video go by, I thought this was AI generated. It was a parody of sorts. I'm like, there's no way CNN just ripped Joe Biden another, you know what, during a live podcast. I'm like, holy shit, this is actually real. So let's play this first clip, and then we have to play this this other interview here. What's this guy's name? Bernstein?
Bernstein.
Jared Bernstein. Trying to explain U.S. monetary policy, and it's absolutely scary, if not crazy altogether. Anyways, just showing how crazy the times are today. Let me just switch slide decks here so I can get to the audio portion for the audience members here. So we have two clips to listen to. Hold on. So this one here, yes, and publish. Okay. So we'll start with this one. Actually, is that the right one? No, that's not right. Hold on, Andy. I've been having some glitches just before we went live.
I haven't seen that because I never turned CNN on. I don't even know if it's on my cable network, but I'm interested to see it.
Okay. Well, I never watched them either. It was presented to me. I'm like, oh, okay, this is a joke, right? So you're gonna okay. So I'm gonna watch your reaction in live format here as we play this clip. So let me go to the beginning of this again here, and let's give this a try. Let me know right away if you hear this. Okay.
When you talk about the economy, of course, it is by far the most important issue for voters. It's also true right now, Mr. President, that voters by a wide margin trust Trump more on the economy. They say that in polls, and part of the reason for that may be the numbers. And you're aware of many of these, of course. The cost of buying a home in the United States is double what it was when you look at your monthly costs from before the pandemic. Real income, when you account for inflation, is actually down since you took office. Economic growth last week, far short of expectations. Consumer confidence, maybe no surprise, is near a 2-year low. With less than 6 months to go to Election Day, are you worried that you're running out of time to turn that around?
We've already turned it around. Look at the Michigan survey. Where 65% of American people think they're in good shape economically. They think the nation's not in good shape, but they're personally in good shape. The polling data has been wrong all along. You know, how many, you guys do a poll with CNN, how many folks you have to call to get one response? The idea that we're in a situation where things are so bad. We've created more jobs. We're in a situation where people have access to good paying jobs. And the last I saw, a combination of the inflation, the cost of inflation, all those things, that's really worrisome to people with good reason. That's why I'm working very hard to bring the cost of rentals down, to increase the number of homes that are available. But let me say it this way. When I started this administration, people were saying there's going to be a collapse in the economy. We have the strongest economy in the world. Let me say it again, in the world.
Although GDP last week was far short of expectations.
Oh, it wasn't. Look, GDP is still, look at the response of the markets. Overwhelmingly positive. And one of the reasons why people feel good about it not being as strong as it was before is they believe that the Fed's going to respond.
They hope they're going to get a rate cut.
Yeah. Well, no president's had the run we've had in terms of creating jobs and bringing down inflation. It was 9% when I came to office. 9%. But look, people have a right to be concerned. Ordinary people. The idea that you bounce a check and you get a $30 fee for Bounce in a check, change that. You can't charge more than $8 for that. Or your credit card, your late payment, $35. I mean, there's corporate greed going on, and it's got to be dealt with.
Okay. where do you want to start on?
I mean, it's unbelievable. You look at inflation. Inflation was way lower when he took office, and it took off long after he was in office. Corporate greed? Are you kidding me?
Are you kidding
That's
me?
the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And employment. I mean, how hard is it to have huge employment numbers coming off of a major pandemic when everyone was out of work? Everything he said is a bunch of crap. It's a lie. And I mean, it's like you can't make it up. Jean-Claude, you can't make this stuff up.
You can't make it up. On top of it, he says, oh, well, this particular poll in Michigan says that 65% of Americans thinks they're doing okay. And then he goes on to say, but the polling is not good.
It's you can't make it up at all. And
wow.
I think that's part of the problem is that, it's nice that CNN actually had the audacity to actually have a little bit of journalistic integrity and hold the guy's feet to the fire. And
Yeah, just a little bit of reality. Like, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, all the media is doing is keeping us divided these days and not giving us any real information. But I mean, if you look at the real inflation numbers, if you look at what they truly are, they're 10 or 11%. They're not the 3.5%, 4% that we see right now, and a long ways away from their 2% target that they'll never get to. So yeah, he's just a buffoon. He really truly is a fool.
Yeah. Cliff is saying in the chat, like, they rolled out the Balchinian version of Biden there. Let me bring this back up. Did you remember seeing, that was a couple of months ago, he was being interviewed on a plane, and it appeared that he had these two big testicles basically coming out of his chin. It's not as apparent there, but he looked like the guy.
You kind of see it right there. Yeah, I see that.
From the Men in Black series. Anyways, that was funny. I think it was from the Back in Time version of it.
Balchinian Biden.
Yeah.
That's very funny, Cliff.
Yeah. I'll bring up a picture comparison, Andy. If you haven't seen it, you're going to
I have not.
The next video we want to play is Jared Bernstein. Again, so set the stage as to why this is important and why you want me to play this.
Well, I've talked about this guy. I'm sure by now most people have seen it, but for those who haven't, you have to. Yeah. I've talked about this guy, probably have given him far too much respect for a long time, because his thesis is to lose the world reserve status. It's a privilege we can't afford. He's written reports about this called Dethrone King Dollar. And when Trump put tariffs on China, he publicly said, great, maybe we'll lose the reserve status. That was picked up in the Washington Post, Dethrone King Dollar in the New York Times. And if you think about it, if you wanted to lose the reserve status, what better three things could you do than to sign an executive order to go green, in essence, tell Saudi Arabia and the rest of OPEC, hey, we're going to go a different direction, then weaponize the dollar and go even beyond weaponizing the dollar in the Treasury, and now speak of confiscating those assets and use them to give money to the Ukraine and to buy military weaponry for their war. In fact, it's exactly what they're saying. That's what the EU wants, and that's what we're supposed to do with the $5 billion, buy weapons to give to the Ukraine. But if China, the ally of Russia and BRICS, gives any money whatsoever to Russia, well, they will then be sanctioned, not only their banks and their companies, but Beijing itself. So by weaponizing the dollar, signing executive order to go green, and then let the country fall apart internally, we are incentivizing, in my mind, what Jared Bernstein wants. And that's why he's been a central theme of everything I've talked about over the last year regarding weaponizing of the dollar and its impact or its consequences, whether intended or not. When you watch this video, you're going to have to wonder, have I been giving this guy too much credit? Because I don't know that. I mean, he almost makes Biden look smart. I'll let you all decide for yourself if you haven't seen it. You should watch this. It's 1:40. Watch it. If you haven't seen it, enjoy. If you have, it's worth watching again.
Yeah, let's play this. Can I put it on maybe a little bit faster? I'll put it on 1.5. I think it'll be good. And we'll come back after that for discussion.
The U.S. government can't go bankrupt because we can print our money. It obviously begs the question, why exactly are we borrowing in a currency that we print ourselves? I'm waiting for someone to stand up and say, why don't we borrow our own currency in the first place?
like you said, they print the dollars. So why does the government even borrow?
Well, again, some of this stuff gets, some of the language and concepts are just confusing. I mean, the government definitely prints money, and it definitely lends that money, which is why the government definitely prints money, and then it lends that money by selling bonds. Is that what they do? They sell bonds. Yeah, they sell bonds. Right? Since they sell bonds, and people buy the bonds and lend them money. Yeah. So a lot of times, at least in my year with MMT, the language and the concepts can be kind of unnecessarily confusing. But there is no question the government prints money, and then it uses that money to yeah. I guess I get really fucked. I don't get it. I don't know what they're talking about. Like it's like the government clearly prints money, does it all the time, and it clearly borrows. Otherwise, we would be having this debt and deficit conversation. So I don't think there's anything confusing there.
This is the lead economist to the U.S. government. I mean, you want to talk about laughing stock and embarrassment. I don't know what you could say more about that. It's just insanity. So he's right there from the Biden school of communication and understanding and intelligence.
Like, again, when I watched the CNN clip, I thought it was The Onion or a satire, and then realized, oh, wow, this is true. And then when I watched this guy, my first reaction was, is he doing the walk of shame? Is somebody putting him through this process to make it look so bad and obvious to everybody else that, the clowns are running the circus? Like, what's going on? Like, do you think or is it just that stupid? Like you're saying, like you're giving him too much credit. Like,
I mean, at some point there has to be some people within these news organizations. I don't care how left they are that says, I mean, Jesus, what are we going to do about this? We have to say something. We can't go along with this madness. Not everyone can go along with this madness. And, I think maybe there is a glimmer of that. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how else to, I don't even know how else to, and it just, I read this twice, and I've done a few podcasts today, and it goes, it's like this. I want to read you one more thing here because it's like, you can't make this stuff up. And I was saying yesterday, I was sitting in my swimming pool at night, just thinking about the day, and I started to get mad. And I don't like that. I don't like that I get so pissed off, but I really was getting angry about something I just read. And I'm like, you can't make this up anymore. And I'm like, I'm getting itchy from it. Like, I just can't take it anymore. It's like, how much more of this shit can we take? Right. Let me read this to you. This is coming from the minority leader of the House, Hakeem Jeffries, this flipping moron, right? He says, the U.S. may have to deploy troops to the Ukraine if Kiev suffers a complete collapse against Russia. House Minority Leader Hakeem the Idiot Jeffries has warned in an interview with CBS News released on Sunday. The senior Democratic lawmaker suggested that if Kiev cannot win the war with Russia using billions of our dollars worth of U.S. military aid, Washington could potentially have to intervene directly in the conflict. Now, here's where, from the category of you can't make this shit up. And it just bothers me, and I am not a chauvinist, okay? For all the ladies out there, it's not what I'm saying here. I want you just to understand it in the context that I mean it to be, right? Okay? And if you're 50 years or older, you know what the hell I'm talking about, right? You can't make this shit up. We can't let the Ukraine fall, because if it does, then there's a significant likelihood that America will have to get into the conflict, not simply with our money, but here it is, but with our service women and our servicemen. I mean, at what point can we just stop this shit and speak like normal Americans and just stop the woke pandering crap? Yeah. And then he says, meanwhile, Jeffries claimed that U.S. efforts to support Ukraine, including pushing a new $61 billion assistance package through Congress, has been stymied by what he called a pro-Putin faction. This guy's such an idiot, I'd like to punch him. I mean, here's what he's doing. He's vilifying Marjorie Taylor Greene. A little bit of a lightning rod, but why is he vilifying her? Why is he calling her pro-Putin? Because he singled out the Republican Congresswoman, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who has called for the funds to be used for domestic needs rather than sent to the Ukraine. $61 billion to the Ukraine, and God forbid you want to, fix our border and fix our crumbling infrastructure and add some more police, because in Denver, they just cut $8 million off the police budget in order to come up with $8 million to come up with like $60 million to feed and house and give medical service to the illegal immigrants. So we've lost our mind in this country, and our politicians, whether it be nut job President Biden or our ridiculous head economists, or in this case, the minority Senate leader, Hakeem Jeffries, we've lost our mind, and it's starting to really start to create this divisiveness. And I see Jake in there saying he's not divided, but we are divided. We're so pissed off at each other because half the country's lost its mind. And maybe there's a little bit of sanity creeping into the ether in some of these woke left-leaning media outlets, where maybe one or two of them say, damn it, I'm just going to ask a hard question because this is stupid already. Now, I'm probably giving them far too much credit, but JC, honestly, it's pushing me over the edge, and I can see why they say divide and conquer is the first step of the Communist Manifesto, because we are becoming more and more divided, listening to these idiots who are making us stupider every second.
Oh, that's crazy. And how dare she, Marjorie, of course, try to redirect funds to make America better? Like, what a horrible person she must be. And of course, they just quashed down her motion to replace Mike Johnson here, the speaker. All of this was on the Ukraine funding bill and the Gaza funding bill also that just passed. So craziness continues, Andy. I saw a couple of news articles too. I wanted to share with you. And Andy, be careful about banging on the table. You're giving some.
Oh, sorry, I get a little too upset.
Yeah, the mic goes a little bit fuzzy and we can't hear you.
Sorry about that.
I want to make sure. No, but you're passionate about it, and I agree. I mean, it's very frustrating. It's absolutely it's insane.
Well, and as a result, when you talk about like our trust being a broken glass.
Yeah.
You smash a glass. If I have this cup of coffee, I smash it on the ground. How hard will it be to push it back together? Right? You can't. It's impossible. That's our trust. And that's why you're seeing things that aren't reported by the news. Representative Mooney, West Virginia, I think, asked for a Freedom of Information Act to know how much gold is being taken from the New York Fed, and they didn't answer. But there was a report that just came out that said several African and Middle Eastern nations have begun withdrawing their gold reserves from the United States. Nigeria, South Africa, Ghana, Senegal, Cameroon, Algeria, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia, each representing crucial regions in Africa and the Middle East, have all begun taking their gold out of the New York Fed. I mean, it's the old thing of if you don't own it, you don't possess it, you don't own it. Counterparty risk. We've lost so much in the way of trust. That's exactly what's happening, whether it be shedding of our treasuries or now taking back gold held by the New York Fed, which was not always there because of it being the main hub of trading here in the West and the ease in which they could transfer it, balance of payment and whatnot. They don't care. They give me back my gold. I don't trust you anymore is in essence what that's saying. And that's what's happening. And we're losing our trust around the globe and at home with half of the populace. And that's why 41% of America, according to a new poll by Rasmussen, says they're expecting a civil war of some sorts in the next 5 years. I'm sure, Cliff could tell us a lot more about that and his data, but that's what 41% of the country is thinking right now. It's probably higher than that.
The Webbot data is not looking at 5 years from now. It's a lot closer if you look at his stuff here. I'll try to get him on. I know he's incredibly busy, but guys, you can go read his Substack for the latest stuff there, and it appears to be a lot closer than that. And the fact what we're just talking about now too, it's not just Andy now talking about this stuff and being not facetious but serious about the broken trust. Main institutions. So let me just bring out two news articles. This one here from earlier today on Zero Hedge. Billionaire real estate investor expects 1 or 2 bank failures a week. And UK economists say entering a new dark age. This is a headline. This is not. This is mainstream news. And on top of that, this one here, the IMF now says prepare for the US dollar collapse. The IMF is warning us. Andy, like, we have to be close to something weird. And when you add to that these countries who are repatriating their gold, the lack of confidence, the anger we're feeling, you're getting the itches here of hyper novelty. So are the audience members. We got to be close to something giving here too. Like, do you think this is the lead up now? I heard in the last couple of days, a couple of researchers saying that basically it's go time and that they've decided now to pull the plug really for this economic crash, that they're going to pin it on Biden somehow. And, maybe try to introduce this CBDC. We'll get to that in a second here. Do you think we're close to that here? They have to do something before the BRICS takes over. Is that the impetus? Is that the what's forcing their hand here? How do you put this together?
I mean, I think that certainly it's very plausible. I mean, look at it this way. Last year, 2023, Q1 was the biggest accumulation of gold by central banks in history. We just passed it for Q1 2024. The central banks, who have more information than anyone, they're buying gold at levels the world has never seen. And they're not reporting all of it. And when you talk about, is it go time? Are they gonna bust up the banks? Yeah, I mean, there's no question. We're even being told constantly by Powell that there will be bank failures and there will be consolidations. And I think people need to really understand what it is, what risk it is to have money in the banks. There's over 900 banks that we are told are deemed to be in trouble, right? 350 of them are deemed to be in imminent danger, according to the FDIC. And if you really dig into it, go to FDIC.gov, you would understand that when you put money in the bank, it's no longer yours. It's a loan to the bank. You are an unsecured or last to be paid general creditor of the bank. And that means that when you deposit money in the bank is the owner of that money. They owe you a debt. And this is the reason why we should be concerned of the 900 banks in trouble, the 350 imminently. When Fed Chairman Powell says there will be bank failures, but not the big banks, more than likely, these are the banks that are licking their chops, like a school of, like a shark spotting a school of chum, because they're going to gobble up all of the assets. And what's interesting, there was a report, a guy named Mike Savage wrote a report, he's a smart guy, and I read it and talked about a report written by the FDIC.gov report from December 10th, 2012. And he says your deposits would then be converted into shares in the bank. See, they didn't just steal it, it's a debt for equity swap. What's the problem with that? You can't pay your bills with shares of a bank. When people sell shares to pay living expenses, the stock will likely collapse. If you find yourself in this situation, try to be the first one out the door. Even if you take a significant loss, it will likely be far less than if you wait for a rebound. That may never happen. What he's saying there is that the FDIC rules are, anything over the FDIC coverage, you get shares of the new bank, which is basically a defaulted bank that is now taken over, and everyone will try to sell to get cash to pay their bills, which will collapse. The whole thing is a mess, no question about it. And I think that the likelihood of there not being some big problems in the banking system, we haven't even talked about commercial real estate and what that's doing to it. It's real, and it's getting more real by the second. And when you see these types of admissions where the IMF is coming out warning about the debt, warning about a default, and the Fed chairman is saying the same thing. It's going to happen. They're laying the crumbs at your feet. See, we told you, but who's really listening?
All right. Let's get into crypto for just a second here too. I wanted to share this with the audience members yesterday and I ran out of time. We're seeing, you and I kind of talked about it last week. We're seeing banks around the world starting to refuse withdrawals. They're suggesting now, some of the researchers in the background are saying that they're withholding the money to perhaps do a swap with new CBDC, that they're almost ready to roll this out, and that's why we're seeing it. So this is a further continuation of that. Australia's Macquarie Bank will stop cash withdrawals here this month and go completely cashless. Again, one of that stepping stone here, perhaps, to get into that CBDC competition here with decentralized crypto. What was interesting just the other day, Trump was saying that he's fine with crypto and makes fun of Joe Biden for not knowing what that is. But more to that, he's saying also he's going to accept it here for campaign donations. So he's signaling something here that we're about to move into a new phase of the war here, of these currency wars around the planet, and that we might be closer to that demarcation line than perhaps we think. And as we're seeing the other players move their chess pieces around the board, let me just name another few here. Donald Trump and the Fed could help Bitcoin price rocket to 100,000 by 2025, Forbes says. That was interesting. This one here, just in, EU Securities Authority is exploring adding Bitcoin and crypto exposure to the tune of 12 trillion investment market. So that's interesting also. And this, there was another one. I lost the other one here. So there seems to be moves being played out here that are going to force this war between the old system and the new system. And that, of course, is going to put pressure also on gold and silver. We're seeing it now again in the charts. We're seeing it in the sentiment. People, as you said, don't trust the system. And as this war seems to be playing out, where do you put your money? Do you leave it in the bank, Andy? Do you go into bonds? Or do you go into gold and silver? Talk about this war here, what you're seeing being played out, as we just saw here in the news in the last 24 hours, and perhaps what kind of pressure that's going to put on gold and silver.
Yeah, I don't know how much pressure it will ultimately put on it. Maybe some. The allocation by the West and the public is so small that it to me, I'm not quite sure how much of a problem it truly is. Yeah,
Well, the allocations now are small. The point is, as the confidence breaks and as these banks start to fail and as these people try to introduce you and force you into CBDC, suddenly, as we're seeing pension fund managers around the world decide to, maybe we need a little bit more exposure into gold and silver, we might see that in a big way. That's at least my feeling.
And that's how I would look at it. And I am not an expert on crypto yet. I speak on a lot of crypto channels, and I was just at the XRP convention in Las Vegas. I acknowledge the reality of it, and I think that in general we should all be. They're complementary to me as far as I'm concerned. They should not be adversarial. I think it's immature and shallow-minded to be that way. I have a little bit of exposure into crypto, 1 or 2 Bitcoin. I have some Theta and some XRP, and I just think that it's naive to not acknowledge it. But I think the sooner the realization that they're complementary asset classes instead of adversarial, the better off it will be. You look at what do all the central banks own? They all own gold. They don't all own Bitcoin, and they don't all own cryptocurrency. That's not to say that it shouldn't be a part of people's portfolio. I think that a portfolio of cryptocurrency with a little bit of gold and silver behind it or underneath it only makes the portfolio that much stronger. And I think that, we've already seen the potential of crypto, how it can make you very wealthy. To me, the realization of buying precious metals comes with the collapsing of the banks and of the system, that you have to get out of the system.
Right.
And, there are very few things that allow you that exodus out of the system. And that's, the same. See, that's the thing. The same argument for precious metals is really largely intact in cryptocurrencies. The difference is that one camp wants to profit, one camp is more concerned about preserving. But, so what? So you take some of your profits off of your cryptos and put it into gold and preserve it. You have just made your portfolio stronger. You have just de-risked a portion of it. You have balanced it out. And so I don't look at it as being negative for gold. I look at this as being very positive for it in terms of what's happening with the entire system and the realization that there are very few places where you can find safety out of the system.
I think we're on the same page, Andy.
Gold.
Yeah, I think we're on the same page. My point was, as we're seeing these titans fight out for this new financial system between the old world and perhaps the new CBDCs, we need an escape valve for people who are educated, who don't want to be part or who don't want to be exposed to that risk of those battles that are going to go on. As Jim Sinclair said, we might have 1, 2, 3 resets, one after the other here, as these bigger players are playing these games. So what is one to do? And that's why we look at gold and silver and some of the decentralized cryptos. For this conversation,
you mentioned the IMF too, real quick. Even Kristalina Georgieva, the head of the IMF, is calling for a pegging of something to a CBDC, or it becomes fiat. My guess is that would be the pushback to the BRICS, would be, the IMF trying to issue some sort of a tokenized currency, maybe like backed by a stable coin of gold, maybe using XRP. I don't know, but I'm just simply saying I have believed for a very long time there will be a marriage of blockchain and commodities like gold. And, we've been told by the Russian finance ministers over and over again that their currency will be a basket of commodities and a basket of currencies. So any CBDC that it doesn't have a pegging to something like gold will be fiat. Yep. So I think that's why I believe that they are complementary, not adversarial, and one should benefit the other.
For more on this conversation, join me on Monday. I believe this is confirmed. Lisa's in. I haven't heard back from Bix yet, but we're going to try to set it up for next week. Another Beyond Crypto roundtable. We're going to get into what perhaps Trump knows and what's just around the corner here in this crazy financial
Two of
world.
my favorite people, well, three of them right there, but both awesome people. I've had the good fortune of having dinner at Lisa's house and traveled around the country with Bix and known him a long time. And that's the thing about the three of you and anyone that I talk to. You're all excellent people, and that's the thing, is that there is still this spirit of fairness and equality, and I know you're Canadian, but I'll still call it the American spirit, where we've done well with our backs against the wall, and God bless people like you who are telling the truth. The media nowadays doesn't do anything to prepare us for what's coming. And if anything, all they do is divide us and make us feel upset and angry at one another. That's why 41% of the country is waiting for a civil war.
Yeah. And itchy at the same time.
Yeah.
Getting the itches here from hyper novelty. Do you remember this Canadian story? You and I talked about this when it originally happened. There was the gold heights at the Toronto airport. Just a couple of weeks ago now, they've arrested 19 people here. Or there's 19 charges, but there's quite a few involved in this crew, most of them airport workers. So I thought that was a nice conclusion. The gold is back, or they're trying to get to it at any rate. So I thought that was funny. It leads us into the gold segment here. Andy, I saw this earlier today. The Dow to gold ratio now has a lower low. Okay. You've shared your thesis last week on this. For the people who are just watching now too, why is this important to look at here? And what does this spell perhaps for this third leg of the bull run, as Frank Justra was tweeting just the other day also?
Yeah, things like the Dow and oil are getting cheaper in relation to gold. Mm-hmm. There was a time when there was a 1-to-1 ratio in 1980. They were both right around 850, 850. And there are a lot of people who believe we'll get back to that number. Mm-hmm. But if you look at gold simply in dollar terms, you start to lose a little bit of perspective. Measure it against things like Bitcoin. Bitcoin's falling in relation to the price of gold. Look at it in terms of the Dow. The Dow is falling in relation to gold. Look at it in terms of oil. Oil is falling in terms of gold. And so what that tells you is that gold is maintaining its purchasing power, and the traditional forms of investment, the traditional forms of value, are falling in relation to gold. And that's one way to notice, because gold has been at all-time highs against almost every currency in the world for a very long time, much longer than it has in US dollars. And that's because we're kind of blinded by the inordinate and unjustified strength of the dollar. But look at it in terms of things like oil, the Dow, and other currencies, and you begin to see that it is indeed doing what it is supposed to do. There are a lot of people who will tell you, and my mentor, Richard Russell, always used to say that we will see 1-to-1 Dow gold ratio again. Don't know what that number is. Maybe it's at 20,000. Who knows? But history has proven that's not a crazy statement to make.
On this particular tweet, gold, this very simple chart will play out. The author says, doubting this will be the biggest mistake of your lifetime. Perhaps here they're pointing to the third and final bull phase here of gold. I wanted to go back to silver for a second here too. Silver is in a breakout mode. Next level will be taken out is $30 here. Never has there been a bigger opportunity or threat to the system. I believe that's correct also. Where are you on silver right now? What are you hearing? What do you see in terms of supply coming into the system and investment opportunities also? What are you hearing?
The most undervalued asset ever, generational opportunity. And the only thing that's really getting more expensive are silver eagles right now. Premiums are ridiculously low. I've said that since December of last year. I don't understand it. It's a contrarian indicator to me that the American public has been selling into this rally, whether they need it or they're looking for money to go buy other things like Nvidia or Bitcoin. And at the same time, you see a country like India import 500 million ounces of silver in the last 2.5 years, which is over double almost double the total amount on COMEX, of which, of the nearly 300 million ounces on COMEX, only 45 are available for sale. The other 240 million ounces are not for sale, and they don't belong to those that are intending to sell it, or a lot of it doesn't. So, you talk about COMEX, there's over 10 times more silver that has been produced or accumulated by India in the last 2.5 years than is on the COMEX exchange. The LBMA, the London Bullion and Metals Association, has the lowest amount of silver it's had in its 140-year history. It's a situation where they're trying their damnedest, like a Bank of America, short 1 billion ounces. Why? Why would they be short 1 billion ounces? And I keep talking about John Little and the Pickaxe Substack, talking about the military-industrial complex's need for silver in high-tech weaponry. I've talked with an analyst from the Department of Defense who's become a buddy of mine. We talk about it all the time. He tells me only non-classified stuff and says, you're right, there is about 500 ounces in the Tomahawk cruise missile. But that's just one form of high-tech aerospace and weaponry. How much is really being used? And there was an article that he wrote, Pickaxe, and he showed, I'll read you one paragraph. He just pulls out a news article from 1942 or 1943, and he reads it, and he says, in the passage below, military use of silver in the 40s was projected at 200 million ounces a year. It says the present consumption of silver for war purposes at the rate of about 100 million ounces a year and is growing rapidly. According to the War Production Board, it is only a matter of months before war demands will have increased sufficiently to require at least 200 million ounces a year. So this was an article written in 1943 in a newspaper. Well, why does the Silver Institute omit silver use in its supply-demand fundamentals? Is that why Bank of America is short 1 billion ounces? Is that why JP Morgan paid a $920 million fine for manipulating the metals market? Michael Nowak, who I know is in prison, the head trader for them, is that why? But yet they're still allowed to be the administrator of the world's largest silver trust? Is that why BlackRock has such a big stake in both SLV and PSLV? You ask yourself these questions, why? And that's back it out, and it becomes, I think, a lot easier to explain it. But I think there are very few assets on the planet that offer the potential and offer the lack of downside risk that silver does. So yeah, I think it's great. I think people would be naive to miss out on what I think is a generational opportunity. I mean that. And the fact that I own a metals company, I try to pull myself out of that statement.
For sure, yeah.
Because I really do mean it.
Yeah, yeah. If you guys want to look at the Big Swear's latest video here, silver alert, silver is ready to blow past $30. He says announce, then 50, and then the blue sky. It seems to be correlating with Cliff High's data also, suggesting that silver would be battling it up all summer here. So we're seeing a lot of pressure there. So that's interesting. Andy, I put up 2 new specials here that you had on your website today. We have the gold 1/10 of an ounce coins here from the Royal Canadian Mint at 29 over melt. Yep. And these cool Krugerrands. Talk about those.
Yeah, they're as cheap as I've sold them in 4 years. They're 2023s in boxes. And the best way to get our best prices is to ignore our website, send us an email at info@milesfranklin, say JC sent me, or actually to use your form. I apologize. And your form. And that way we make damn sure that your listeners and followers get the white glove service. And it's very important to us. So everything with the exception of Silver Eagles is on sale. One other point I wanted to make real quick. I know we're getting towards the end here. I just wanted to talk about the amount of gold in particular that is leaving the COMEX facilities and finding its way to Hong Kong. And just the other day, there were 7,560 kilobars of gold that were shipped out to a COMEX-approved depository in Hong Kong. Now, there are, believe it or not, there is a depository run by Brinks in Hong Kong that is COMEX approved. Okay. And the majority of all the movement through these Hong Kong vaults are caused by what's called EFP transactions, exchange for physical, where an entity will buy metal in the West and deliver it into a COMEX facility, usually in London. In this case, just about anything that goes to the Hong Kong vaults is exchanged for physical. And once it arrives in Hong Kong, the shorts would be unwound and the gold would then be transferred by armored car to the Shanghai Gold Exchange. So listen to this, between the Shanghai Gold Exchange where the purchase, the contract for immediate delivery of physical gold would take place, and the Shanghai Futures Exchange, the combined average daily volume over the past 2 months has increased more than 200% and now exceeds the average trading volume of the New York COMEX. effectively, that now makes Shanghai the world's second largest gold trading market after the London Bullion Market Association. And so basically what they're doing is they short the paper price, and then they buy the physical for immediate delivery in Shanghai, and they'll also buy the physical on contract form in the West and exchange for physical in Shanghai or in Hong Kong in the vaults, which then gets trucked over to the Shanghai Gold Exchange. And they're very specific to mention kilo bars because that's what is traded on the Shanghai Gold Exchange. So how these countries sidestep sanctions and gobble up all the Western gold is just like this. Iran will sell their oil to China for yuan, which is immediately convertible into gold on the Shanghai Gold Exchange. And I'm sure a lot of that gold that they're cash and carrying, taking away, is exchanged for physical off the COMEX that is sent to Hong Kong and then trucked to Shanghai and then sold off the exchange to countries like Iran and Russia, who are sidestepping the exchanges by selling us their commodities or selling China their commodities for yuan, which is immediately convertible into gold, which is what? The only other tier one asset, which is what? The asset that's been bought more in the first quarter of 2024 by central banks than ever before. In the last 3 years, more than ever before combined. You can see the progression. It's not just silver, it's gold. But there's a rumor that silver is becoming really hot in China too because of the shortage of immediate delivery gold. They're telling all their people, start buying silver. That's the rumor. Right. And so, whether it be gold, whether it be silver, there's a good portion of the world that looks at it for what it is, as wealth outside the system with no counterparty risk. And here in the West, we don't get that, at least not yet.
Wow. Indicative of the times. Hey, thank you, Tiffany, for that beautiful comment. A lot of people suggesting there, of course, rightly so, that Miles Franklins are very professional with their customer service. I totally agree. That's why Andy's on the show, and that's why I buy my silver from them also. Chuck Wood says, hey, any silver sales in Canada? Why, yes. Let me see if I can bring this up on the screen for you guys. Also, if you go to mfbullion.ca, guys, currently this week, we have the assorted 10-ounce silver bars on sale here at $2.99 over spot Canadian. Of course, you can pay in Canadian dollars, and these are shipped directly here from Canada. So that's mfbullion.ca. Andy, before we go, is there anything else like on your radar right now that we need to pay attention to? Things coming up maybe next week or later this month? A lot of guys were making weird predictions about May 15, May 18, maybe being critical dates here, or something weird happening. What's your take on it? What's the pulse of the situation?
I wish I knew. I spent 5 days out of town in Las Vegas and have been doing all I could just to keep up. I was at the conference. I don't know what's coming up. I'll be the first one to admit it, but I guess I will just simply say to you that every single day something new and crazy happens. I think for people not to be hypersensitive right now about what's happening is crazy. I apologize. I can't be more definitive on that, but rather than trying to make something up, I don't have anything on my radar that isn't already overloaded. I mean, every single day I look at the world and say, what the hell's going on here? I can't take this anymore. How is it that I see this everywhere I look, and yet, half of the public has no idea? So no, I don't. I mean, maybe commercial real estate. I saw just the other day that the second largest building in St. Louis, the former AT&T Center, 44 stories. It was sold for $205 million in 2006. It just sold for $3.6 million. There are houses all throughout my neighborhood that are way more than that, and you're getting a 44-story office building in St. Louis for $3.6 million. I mean, when you talk about potential warning signs, I mean, how much further do you need to look? The Holiday Inn Express in Washington, D.C. just sold for $18.5 million, and it still had $83 million owed to it by the lender. The lender was the only one bidding for the building. They took it back. Right. And so when you talk about the ramifications of things really breaking, like we were talking about with the banks, that article you read, I mean, that is where I've been really looking. If I think there's going to be problem, it would be in the banks. And I think if people have over the FDIC limit in any of these banks, you're out of your mind. And whether you put it into immediately very, very short treasuries directly through the Fed or directly through the U.S. government, treasurydirect.gov, like, 60-day treasuries or 90-day treasuries or less, or buying gold or buying Bitcoin in your own. I don't care what you do. Just get out of the banks, because I guess the more I think about it, to me, that is where if I had to guess where it all starts, that's where it starts.
But Andy, the Bank of Canada governor just said today that the financial system is stable, so don't worry.
Yeah, well,
and on Bloomberg News,
and so did Jared Bernstein, just not so articulately.
Right. And the Bank of Canada just said that households can cope with a higher rate. Don't worry, everything's fine. All right, Andy, thank you so much for being on
JT, you
today.
stay well, brother. There's no one better than you, and my best to everyone out there. Say hi to Bix and Lisa for me. Say hi to Cliff. I hope you all stay well, and God bless you all. Look forward to picking up where we left off next week.
All right, sounds good. And folks, please join me this afternoon at 4 p.m. Eastern for this special Rumble edition of the Beyond the News. Trump knows. So we're going to be decoding some of this and much, much more at 4 p.m. Eastern. All right, guys, we'll see you later. Au revoir.